My name is Marcus Webb, and I have been a maintenance supervisor for the New York City Transit Authority for 23 years. Badge number 4712. I've worked every major line, every abandoned station, every forgotten tunnel beneath Manhattan. I've seen rats the size of cats, homeless encampments in places you wouldn't believe people could survive, and flooding that would make you understand why they call some sections the underground rivers. I thought I had seen everything the subway system could show me. I was wrong. Before I tell you what happened on Christmas night 2023 and why I can never celebrate that holiday the same way again, I need you to understand something very clearly. If you're planning to visit New York City, if you ride the subway late at night, especially during the holidays when the trains run on modified schedules, you need to know the truth about what exists in the spaces between the stations. What I'm about to share could save your life. Before continuing, if you subscribe and like the video, you will be contributing greatly to the continuation of new stories to come. I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. Have any of you ever been on the New York City subway after midnight on Christmas? Have you ever noticed how the tunnel walls seem to pulse between stations? Drop a comment and let me know, because I need to know if anyone else has experienced what I'm about to describe. There is a section of the New York City subway system that exists between the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station and the decommissioned original City Hall station that was closed to the public in 1945. It's a loop, part of the old Lexington Avenue line, and it covers approximately 1,200 feet of curved track with ornate tile work and skylights that haven't seen natural light in nearly 8 decades. Most New Yorkers don't even know it exists. The Transit Authority doesn't advertise it. Tour groups occasionally get special permission to see it, but only during daylight hours, never alone, and never after 8 p.m. There's a reason for that. What I am about to tell you goes against every non-disclosure agreement I signed when I was promoted to maintenance supervisor in 2015. After what happened last Christmas, after learning that we lost 2 more workers in the same section just 3 weeks ago, I can no longer remain silent. This is the story that the MTA, the city government, and multiple federal agencies would prefer stayed buried as deep as the tunnels themselves. December 25th, 2023. Christmas night. I drew the short straw for holiday duty, which meant I was responsible for the overnight maintenance check of the lower Manhattan stations. Most of the other supervisors had families, kids who still believed in Santa Claus, traditions that required their presence. Me? I was divorced. My daughter was spending Christmas with her mother and her new husband in Connecticut, and the holiday overtime pay would help cover the child support I was behind on. At 11:47 p.m., I received a call from Central Dispatch. There was a signal malfunction in the City Hall loop, the decommissioned section. The automated systems were registering a train in that section, which was impossible because no trains had been routed through there in over a year. It was probably just a sensor error, they said, but someone needed to go down and manually reset the system. That someone was me. In my 23 years with the Transit Authority, I had built a reputation for being thorough, unflappable, and rational to the point of being boring. My ex-wife used to say I could make a supernatural thriller sound like a technical manual. I didn't believe in ghosts, urban legends, or the various horror stories that circulated among the younger workers about the abandoned stations. I had heard all of them: the phantom trains that ran without operators, the screaming heard from sealed tunnels, the homeless people who went into the deep tunnels and came out speaking languages that hadn't been spoken in centuries or didn't come out at all. I dismissed these as the natural superstitions that arise in any place that combines darkness, isolation, and the compressed history of millions of people passing through. I was wrong to be so certain. I was wrong about a lot of things. I gathered my equipment: standard maintenance kit, flashlight, spare batteries, multimeter, radio, and the master key that could access every locked gate and door in the system. I also took my personal phone, though I knew cell service would be non-existent in the deeper tunnels. I logged my route with Central Dispatch at 11:52 p.m., telling them I'd radio in once I had eyes on the signal box in the City Hall loop. They acknowledged and told me to be careful. There had been an unusual number of track workers calling in sick over the past 2 weeks, and they were running on a skeleton crew for the holiday. I should have paid more attention to that detail. I should have asked why so many people were refusing to work the lower Manhattan tunnels. But I was focused on getting the job done and getting home to the bottle of bourbon I'd been saving for a night exactly like this. The Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station was nearly empty at midnight on Christmas. A few late shift workers heading home, a couple of drunk tourists who had miscalculated their evening, and a homeless man sleeping against a tiled wall with his possessions arranged around him like a fortress. The platform smelled of urine, bleach, and the particular electrical scent that all subway stations share. I nodded to the transit cop on duty, a young guy named Rodriguez, who I'd seen around but didn't know well. He was sitting in his booth, reading something on his phone, and he barely looked up when I passed. I used my master key to access the maintenance door at the south end of the platform, the one marked with warning signs and a padlock that most passengers probably assumed led to a storage closet. It opened onto a metal staircase that descended into darkness. The stairs went down 3 levels, deeper than most passengers realize the subway system extends. This is something most New Yorkers don't understand about their transit system. It's not just a single layer of tunnels. It's a vertical maze of passages, some dating back to the original IRT construction in 1904, others from expansions in the 1930s and 1940s, and still others from projects that were started and never completed. There are entire stations that were built and abandoned, platforms that never saw a single passenger, tunnels that were sealed off when plans changed or funding disappeared. The city is built on layers. The subway is built on layers. And some of those layers were never meant to be occupied by human beings for very long. I reached the bottom of the stairs and found myself in a service corridor that ran parallel to the active tracks. The walls here were older, the tile work from a different era, cream-colored with green accents that had faded to the color of old bruises. The lighting was sporadic, bulbs that flickered or had burned out entirely, creating pools of shadow between islands of dim yellow light. My flashlight cut through the darkness ahead of me, and I could hear the distant rumble of a train passing through an adjacent tunnel, the sound carrying through the rock and concrete like a mechanical heartbeat. I followed the corridor north, checking my route on the laminated map I always carried. The signal box I needed to access was located in the City Hall loop itself, which meant I needed to reach the point where the active line curved away, and the abandoned section continued its arc. There was an access gate about 400 feet ahead, and from there it would be a straight walk along the abandoned track to the signal box. Simple job. 30 minutes? Maybe 40, if the signal box needed more than a reset. I'd be home by 2 a.m. with a story about how I spent Christmas night in the guts of the city while everyone else was sleeping off their turkey and eggnog. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. I reached the access gate at 12:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I checked my watch, a habit from years of logging maintenance work. The gate was a floor-to-ceiling metal barrier with a locked gate, the kind that required my master key. The lock was old, brass-worn, smooth by decades of use, and it took me 3 tries to get it to turn. When it finally opened, the gate swung inward with a sound like a sigh, and I felt a puff of air come from the tunnel beyond. Not the hot, greasy air you normally feel in the subway. This was cold. Not winter cold, but deep cold. The kind you feel in your teeth and bones simultaneously. I stood there for a moment. Flashlight pointed into the darkness beyond the gate, and I had the strangest thought. The tunnel was breathing, not metaphorically. I could feel the air moving in and out in a slow, steady rhythm that matched no ventilation system I knew. In, out, in, out. Each cycle lasting exactly 7 seconds. I counted. I couldn't help myself. 7 seconds in, 7 seconds out. Like something massive was sleeping just beyond the reach of my light. I stepped through the gate. Professional habit made me pull it closed behind me but not lock it. I always left myself an exit. The abandoned section of track stretched ahead of me, curving gently to the left. The City Hall station, the original showpiece of the IRT system, was about 800 feet ahead on that curve. The signal box would be mounted on the wall about halfway there, positioned where it could monitor both the active line and the decommissioned section. My radio crackled with static, and I pressed the transmit button to check in with Central Dispatch. Nothing, not even carrier tone, just empty static that hissed and popped in patterns that almost sounded like words. I tried adjusting the frequency. Still nothing. This wasn't unusual in the deeper tunnels. The radio systems were old, and maintenance was always underfunded. I'd file a report when I got back. I couldn't know then that my radio was working perfectly. The problem wasn't signal interference. The problem was that Central Dispatch in the world I'd left was becoming increasingly distant from the Central Dispatch in the space I was entering. I started walking along the abandoned track, my flashlight beam sweeping from side to side. The tunnel here was different from the modern sections. The walls were covered in tile work that was almost decorative, arched ceilings with architectural details you never saw in the utilitarian stations built after World War II. This section had been designed to impress, to showcase the engineering marvel of the Underground Railway system. The Hines and Lafarge architectural firm had created something beautiful here, a cathedral for the new age of transportation. But beauty decays in darkness. The tiles were cracked, stained with decades of moisture and neglect. The brass fixtures that had once gleamed were corroded to green. The skylights in the ceiling, which once brought natural light down from the street level above, were now sealed over with layers of concrete and asphalt from street repairs over the decades. This place had been entombed. I was walking through a tomb that occasionally vibrated with the passage of trains in the active tunnels nearby. I found the first anomaly at 12:31 a.m. It was small, the kind of thing you could easily miss if you weren't paying attention. A fresh boot print in the dust on the ground. Not old, weathered, or faded. fresh. The dust here accumulated slowly because there was almost no air circulation, and a boot print could last for months or years. But this one was crisp, defined, the tread pattern clearly visible in my flashlight beam. It was pointing in the same direction I was walking, toward the City Hall station. Someone had been down here recently. That wasn't necessarily unusual. Other maintenance workers, transit police doing security sweeps, urban explorers who had somehow gotten past the locked gates. But something about the print bothered me. I knelt down to examine it more closely, and that's when I realized what was wrong. The dust around the print was disturbed in a perfect circle, as if someone had stood there rotating in place. And in the center of the circle, where the boot print should have been deepest, the impression was lighter, almost floating, as if the person who made it had weighed less than they should have, or had been standing there while existing only partially in this physical space. I stood up quickly, my heart rate increasing for the first time since entering the tunnel. The rational part of my brain immediately provided explanations. The dust pattern was a coincidence. The light impression could be from someone walking on their toes. There were a dozen mundane reasons for what I was seeing. But another part of my brain, the part that had evolved to detect predators and recognize danger, was whispering a different message. Something is wrong here. Something is very wrong here. I raised my flashlight and swept it in a full circle, illuminating the tunnel behind me and ahead of me. Nothing. Empty track, ancient tiles, the gentle curve of the tunnel disappearing into darkness in both directions. But I had the overwhelming sensation that I was being watched, not by eyes, by attention itself, as if the tunnel had become aware of my presence and was observing me with interest or curiosity or hunger. I forced myself to keep walking. The signal box was ahead. I would do my job, reset the sensors, and get out of here. My radio crackled again, and this time, I thought I heard something underneath the static. Not words exactly, but a rhythm. A pattern of sounds that rose and fell like speech, but in no language I recognized. I tried the radio again. Central, this is Webb. Radio check. Static. That rhythm again, more insistent. I turned the radio off. Whatever was causing the interference, I didn't need to hear it. I'd complete the maintenance check in silence. But silence in the tunnel wasn't really silence. There were sounds, distant rumbles from trains in other sections, the drip of water from cracks in the ceiling, the scurry of rats in the shadows, and underneath all of that, so faint I might have been imagining it, that breathing sound. 7 seconds in, 7 seconds out. I found the signal box at 12:44 a.m. It was mounted on the tunnel wall inside a metal cabinet with a hinged door secured by another lock. This lock was newer, installed within the past decade as part of a system-wide security upgrade. I used my master key and opened the cabinet. Inside was the expected maze of wiring, circuit boards, and the digital display that showed the sensor status. According to the readout, there was indeed a train detected in the City Hall loop, specifically at the platform of the old City Hall station. The timestamp showed the detection had begun at 11:23 p.m. and was ongoing. I pulled out my multimeter and began testing the sensors. They were functioning correctly. The connections were solid. The power supply was nominal. According to every technical measurement I could perform, the system was accurately reporting a train at the abandoned platform. A train that shouldn't exist. I stood there in the dim light of the signal box, my multimeter in one hand and my flashlight in the other, trying to understand what I was seeing. There were several possible explanations. A maintenance train could have been routed through here without my knowledge, though that would violate multiple protocols. A mechanical fault could be generating a false positive, though every test showed the system working correctly. Or something was on that platform that the sensors were interpreting as a train. Something large, metal, and electromagnetic enough to trigger the detection system. I needed to see for myself. The City Hall station was only about 400 feet ahead, where the tunnel completed its curve. I could walk there, verify visually that the platform was empty, return to the signal box, and file a report recommending a full sensor array replacement. 20 minutes more, and I could leave this place. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have closed the cabinet, walked back the way I came, and refused to ever enter this section again. But I was a professional. I was rational. I needed evidence before filing a report. So I left the signal box open, its diagnostic lights blinking in the darkness behind me, and I walked toward the City Hall station. The tunnel curved, and the architectural detail became more elaborate. This section was meant to be seen, part of the original station's grand approach. There were decorative sconces on the walls, tarnished brass that had once held electric lights. There were panels of colored tile that formed geometric patterns, some of them cracked or missing, but others still intact after more than a century. And there were the skylights, oval openings in the arched ceiling that would have brought shafts of daylight down to the platform during the station's operation. They were sealed now, but I could see the outlines of them, and as I approached the platform, I noticed something strange. The seals weren't uniform. Some of them looked old, layers of concrete and asphalt from decades of street repairs, but others looked newer, much newer, as if someone had recently resealed them. But why would anyone do that? What needed to be kept out or kept in? The platform came into view at 12:53 a.m. I know the exact time because at that moment my watch began to malfunction. The second hand started moving backwards, not quickly, but deliberately, counterclockwise, as if time itself had decided to reverse. I stared at it for several seconds, tapping the crystal, shaking my wrist, but the movement continued. Backwards, backwards, backwards. When I looked up from my watch, I saw the train. It was there, on the track, at the platform. A full consist of 7 cars, the old-style cars that hadn't been in service since the 1960s, maybe earlier. The exterior was dark green, almost black in the dim light, with cream-colored doors and windows that reflected my flashlight beam like eyes. No lights were on inside. No markings or identification numbers were visible. The train was simply there, silent and still, waiting on a track that hadn't seen regular service in nearly 80 years. I stood at the edge of the platform, my flashlight beam traveling the length of the train, trying to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. There was no way a full train could be down here without anyone knowing about it. The logistics alone were impossible. To get a train into this section would require routing it through active tunnels during service hours, coordinating with multiple departments, getting approvals from administrators who would question why a decommissioned station needed train access. This train couldn't be here, but it was. The sensors had detected it. I was standing less than 20 feet from it. I could see the scratches on its exterior, the grime accumulated on its surface, the way the dust had settled on its roof. This was a physical object, solid, real. present. Not a hallucination or a trick of the light. A train that shouldn't exist was sitting on the platform of a station that officially didn't operate, and I was alone in the dark with it. I stepped onto the platform. The tile work here was extraordinary, even in its decayed state. Arched ceilings with coffered panels, each decorated with colored tiles forming rosettes and geometric patterns. Brass railings, now green with age, separated the platform from the track, and suspended from the ceiling, covered in decades of dust, were the original chandeliers, ornate fixtures designed to make this station feel more like a theater lobby than a subway stop. This had been the crown jewel of the system, the signature station designed to prove that mass transit could be elegant, civilized, beautiful. Now it was a ghost, and I was standing in its presence with a train that had no business being here. I walked along the platform, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space, approaching the closest car. The cream-colored door was closed. Through the windows, I could see the interior. Rows of wooden benches, leather straps hanging from the ceiling for standing passengers, and nothing else. No people, no lights, no movement. Just an empty car of a train that didn't exist. My watch was still running backwards. I checked the time on my phone instead. 12:58 a.m. But when I looked at the lock screen, I noticed something that sent cold electricity down my spine. The date was wrong. According to my phone, it was December 25th, 1947. Not 2023, 1947. I closed the screen and opened it again. Same date. I restarted the phone. As it powered back up, the startup screen showed the date correctly, December 25th, 2023. But within seconds, it flickered and changed to 1947, then 1952, then 1934, then 1967. The date was cycling through years, each appearing for a few seconds before changing to another. The common element was the day and month. Always December 25th. Always Christmas. But the year kept changing, decades spinning past like pages in a book being ruffled by an invisible hand. This wasn't a malfunction. This was something else. The phone was trying to display the date, but the date itself was unstable. Time in this location was not fixed. It was fluid, overlapping, multiple dates existing simultaneously in the same space. I heard the sound then, not from the train, from somewhere deeper in the station. A voice. No, voices. Multiple voices speaking in unison, creating a sound like a chord, harmonics that resonated in my chest and skull. They were singing. Christmas carols. Silent night. But the voices were wrong. Too many voices creating a single sound, like a recording played back through 1,000 speakers simultaneously, each one slightly out of sync with the others, so that the result was a shimmering, dissonant wall of sound that hurt to hear. The singing came from the tunnel at the far end of the platform, where the track continued its curve back toward the active line. From that darkness, something was approaching. I could hear footsteps now, keeping time with the singing. Not the sound of individual people walking. The sound of many people walking in perfect synchronization, their footfalls creating a single rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Boots on concrete, dozens of them, moving as one. I should have run. Every survival instinct I possessed was screaming at me to turn around, sprint back through the tunnel, get through the access gate, and never enter this section again. But I couldn't move. Not because I was frozen with fear, though fear was certainly part of it. I couldn't move because I had realized something. My shadow was pointing the wrong direction. The light from my flashlight should have thrown my shadow behind me, away from the train. But my shadow was pointing forward, toward the approaching singers, as if there was a light source behind me that was brighter than my flashlight. I turned slowly, dreading what I would see. The train's windows were no longer dark. They were glowing with a soft, golden light, and I could see figures inside, dozens of them, hundreds of them, people sitting on the wooden benches, standing holding the leather straps, pressed against the windows, all of them looking at me, all of them smiling, and all of them had been dead for decades. I recognized some of them, not personally, but from photographs I'd seen in training materials, from historical documents about the subway system, from memorial plaques in the break rooms at various stations. These were transit workers who had died in the line of duty, men killed in construction accidents during the original IRT excavation, workers crushed by trains in the 1920s and 1930s, engineers who had died in tunnel collapses, electricians electrocuted during repairs, track inspectors struck by trains they hadn't heard coming, the official dead of the New York City subway system. They were all here, on this train, on Christmas night, wearing the uniforms of their eras, looking at me with expressions that mixed welcome, pity, and something else I couldn't identify. Recognition, maybe? As if they had been waiting specifically for me. As if my arrival had been expected and anticipated and planned for. The singing grew louder, and the synchronized footsteps were closer now. I could see them emerging from the tunnel, a column of people walking 2 by 2, all wearing transit authority uniforms from different eras. Some had the canvas work clothes from the 1900s. Others wore the distinctive blue uniforms from mid-century. A few had the more modern gear from the 1980s and 1990s. They were all ages, all races, men and women in equal numbers. And they were all walking in perfect synchronization, their boots striking the platform in unison, their voices blending into that single, impossible chord as they sang Silent Night in a round that never quite resolved, phrases overlapping and interweaving until the melody became something ancient and terrible. They filed onto the platform, moving around me without touching me, acknowledging my presence with their eyes, but not breaking their formation. They were boarding the train. One by one, they stepped through the cream-colored doors, which opened silently to receive them, and found seats on the benches or positions standing in the aisles. The train was filling with the dead, and I was standing on the platform, watching it happen. A hand touched my shoulder. I spun around, my flashlight illuminating a face I knew. Thomas Chen, a maintenance supervisor who had disappeared 6 months ago. He'd been working a late shift in this same section of tunnel when he simply vanished. The transit authority had searched for 3 days before declaring it an abandonment and issuing a warrant. His wife had insisted something was wrong, that Thomas would never leave his family. But there was no evidence of foul play, and eventually the case went cold. Here he was, standing on the platform in his work coveralls, his equipment belt still hanging from his waist, his flashlight clipped to his chest. He looked exactly as he had in the photographs from the missing person report. He even smelled the same, that mixture of coffee, electrical insulation, and track dust that all of us who work the tunnels carry with us. He was smiling at me, and his eyes were kind, but sad, the way someone looks when they're about to deliver bad news they wish they didn't have to share. "Marcus," he said, and his voice sounded normal, not like the harmonizing choir voices of the others. You need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. You can still leave. You're not scheduled for this train yet. But if you stay much longer, if you see what they're about to show you, you won't be able to go back. The knowledge becomes part of you. And once it's part of you, you're part of the system. Do you understand? I didn't understand. Not even a little bit. But I managed to nod, and I tried to ask him the questions crowding my mind. Where had he been? What was this place? What was happening? But he held up his hand, stopping me. The subway system isn't what you think it is, he said. It's not just infrastructure. It's a network, a nervous system. The city breathes through these tunnels. The city dreams through these stations. And on certain nights, at certain times, the city remembers everyone who has ever died in service to the network. Christmas night is one of those times. The solstice nights, the equinoxes. The system has been collecting us, everyone who has died in these tunnels. And on memorial nights, we ride. We maintain the real network, the one beneath the physical infrastructure. You weren't supposed to be here tonight, Marcus. The dispatch request that sent you here was a mistake, a glitch, a moment when the schedule bled through from another timeline. You need to leave now. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But I was rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the train, from the faces in the windows, from the workers still boarding in their synchronized march. One of them broke from the column as she passed me, a young woman in a uniform from the 1970s, her dark hair pulled back in a bun, her name tag reading Rodriguez. She stopped and turned to face me, and her eyes were the same shade of brown as the young transit cop I'd seen on the platform upstairs. "Tell my grandson," she said, her voice joining the harmonized choir even though she was speaking directly to me. "That abuela watches his shifts. Tell him the transit runs in his blood. Tell him there's no shame in fear as long as it doesn't stop you from doing the work." Then she moved on, boarding the train, finding a spot near a window where she could look out at the platform. Officer Rodriguez upstairs, his grandmother. She died in these tunnels decades before he was born, but she was here. She was watching him, and she had a message she'd waited years to deliver through someone who could still carry words between the living and the dead. Thomas Chen gripped my shoulder more firmly. "The train is about to depart," he said. "When it does, the timeline will reset. You'll find yourself back at the signal box, or even back on the upper platform. You won't remember the details clearly, just a sense of unease, a feeling that something was wrong. That's how it works for people who aren't ready. The system protects you from knowledge that would break you. But Marcus, listen to me. This is going to keep happening. Every year on Christmas night, someone will get sent down here. Someone will witness the memorial train. And eventually, someone will have to make a choice. When that time comes, when you're asked directly, remember that you saw this. Remember that we're not suffering. This is continuation, not ending. We're still serving, just in a different capacity. Do you understand?" I managed to speak, though my voice came out as a whisper. "What choice? What are you talking about?" He smiled again, that sad, kind expression. "The choice to join the network voluntarily, to become part of the system's consciousness while you're still alive. It's rare, but it happens. Someone needs to be the bridge, to walk in both worlds, to maintain the connection. The position is opening soon. You'll know when. You'll feel it. And when you do, remember that it's not a curse. It's an honor, a transformation. The missing hours are never really missing, Marcus. They're expanded. They're infinite. You become the schedule, and the route, and the timing itself. Think about it. The train's engines activated, though I heard no sound of diesel or electric motors. Instead, there was a vibration that I felt in my bones, a frequency that resonated with something deep in the base of my skull. The cream-colored doors closed with a mechanical precision that contrasted sharply with their age. Inside, the dead transit workers had all found their places, standing or sitting, looking forward or out the windows, their faces serene and accepting. Thomas Chen stepped back from me, releasing my shoulder, and he raised his hand in a gesture that was half wave, half salute. "Safe travels, Marcus," he said. "We'll see you again. Maybe not on Christmas. Maybe not for years. But the network always brings back those who are meant to be part of it. Tell my wife, I'm sorry, I couldn't explain. Tell her I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Then he turned and boarded the train, the last to enter, and the door closed behind him with a sound like a sigh. The train didn't move forward or backward. It simply ceased to be on the physical track and began existing somewhere else. The golden light inside the windows became diffused, spreading out into the tunnel itself, and I could see through the cars to the tile work behind them, as if the train was becoming translucent, transitioning from solid matter to something more ephemeral. The figures inside remained visible, but they too were fading, their forms losing definition, becoming suggestions of human shape rather than distinct individuals. The harmonized singing reached a crescendo, a final chord that contained all the previous melodies woven together, and then it cut off sharply, leaving only silence. The train was gone. The platform was empty. My watch was running forward again, and when I checked my phone, it showed the correct date and time, 1:17 a.m., December 26th, 2023. Nearly 25 minutes had passed, though it had felt like only 5 or perhaps 50. Time had become elastic, and I couldn't trust my perception of its passage. I was alone on the platform of the old City Hall station, my flashlight the only source of illumination in the vast, decorated space. The station was exactly as it had been when I arrived. Dust on the tiles, grime on the brass fixtures, no sign that a train had been present, no disturbance in the decades of accumulated dirt on the platform or the tracks. If not for my watch's brief malfunction and the memory seared into my consciousness, I could have believed the entire experience was a hallucination, a waking dream brought on by exhaustion and isolation. But I knew better. I knew it had been real. The message from Rodriguez's grandmother, the warning from Thomas Chen, the faces of all those dead workers. They had been here, in this place, existing in a state that defied my understanding of life and death. And they would be here again next Christmas, and the Christmas after that, riding the memorial train through the hidden spaces of the subway network, maintaining whatever mysterious function Thomas had referred to as the real network. I walked back to the signal box, my legs unsteady, my mind reeling from what I'd witnessed. The diagnostic lights were still blinking, and the readout still showed a train detected at the platform. I watched as I approached. At exactly 1:23 a.m., the detection cleared. The timestamp updated to show normal status. No train. No anomaly. The system had registered something for exactly 2 hours, from 11:23 p.m. to 1:23 a.m., and now it was reporting normal operations. I closed the cabinet, locked it, and began the walk back through the abandoned tunnel to the access gate. My flashlight beam swept across the walls, and I noticed something I hadn't seen on my way in. Messages scratched into the tile work, maintenance codes and dates from workers who had been in this section over the decades. Most were mundane: track measurements, repair notifications, equipment check logs, but some were different. They showed me the train. T. Miller, 12/25, 1978. Saw the memorial run. Tell my family I'm okay. J. Vasquez, 12/25, 1992. The network is alive. We serve in more ways than we know. L. Washington, 12/25, 2007. The messages went back decades, each one from a Christmas night, each one from a worker who had witnessed what I had witnessed and felt compelled to leave a record, a proof, a testament. I reached the access gate at 1:38 a.m. and locked it behind me. The service corridor beyond felt suddenly warm and normal and safe compared to the abandoned section. I could hear trains running in the adjacent tunnels, the familiar rhythmic rumble of the subway doing its work. I walked back to the metal staircase and climbed up to the platform level, emerging through the maintenance door to find the same nearly empty station I'd left nearly 2 hours before. Rodriguez was still in his booth, still reading his phone, and he looked up when I appeared. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Signal box okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. He smiled. "My abuela used to work for the transit authority," he said, unprompted. "She died before I was born, but my mommy told me stories. Abuela always said the subway system takes care of its own, even after they're gone. I didn't understand what she meant until I started working here. Some nights, on the late shifts, I feel like someone's watching over me, keeping me safe. You ever feel that way?" I managed to speak. "Yeah," I said. "I do." I filed my report at 2:13 a.m. Signal malfunction resolved. Sensors reset. System operating normally. I didn't mention the train, the dead workers, the singing, Thomas Chen, or the message from Rodriguez's grandmother. What would I have written? That I witnessed a paranormal event? That the dead ride the rails on Christmas night? That the subway system has a consciousness and a memory and a purpose beyond moving millions of people from point A to point B? Nobody would believe me. I would be referred for psychiatric evaluation. I would lose my position, my clearance, my pension. So I wrote a mundane report about a mundane malfunction and filed it in the system where it would be read by nobody and forgotten by everyone. But I didn't forget. I couldn't forget. The faces in the train windows, the synchronized footsteps, the harmonized voices singing Silent Night, Thomas Chen's warning that the choice was coming, that I would feel when the time was right. 3 weeks later, on January 16, 2024, 2 maintenance workers disappeared in the City Hall loop. David Armstrong and Jennifer Lee, both experienced supervisors, both reliable and competent, both sent to investigate a reported water leak in the abandoned section. They never returned. Search teams found their equipment near the old City Hall platform, arranged neatly as if they had simply set everything down and walked away. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of accident or foul play. The transit authority ruled it an abandonment, though both workers' families insisted they would never leave their jobs or their lives without explanation. I knew better. I knew where they were. They were on the memorial train now, joining the dead who ride on Christmas night. Or they had accepted the choice Thomas had mentioned, becoming bridges between the living network and the hidden one. I attended the mandatory memorial service for them, standing with dozens of other workers in a transit authority facility in Brooklyn, and I watched their names being added to the official list of workers lost in the line of duty. Names that would now appear on a memorial plaque, maybe in this very facility, to be read by future generations of transit workers who would never know the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my apartment in Queens, staring at the ceiling, feeling the subway trains rumbling past in the tunnels beneath my building. The vibrations traveled up through the foundation, through the floors, through my bed frame, and I could feel them in my bones. The same vibration I'd felt on the platform when the memorial train activated. The system was always present, always active, always maintaining its hidden functions. And I was part of it now, whether I wanted to be or not. The knowledge Thomas had warned me about had taken root in my consciousness. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I couldn't unknow what I'd learned. The subway system was alive. It had memory. It had purpose. And it was calling to me, night after night, inviting me to take the next step, to accept the choice, to become something more than just a maintenance supervisor who filed reports and reset signal boxes. I started researching. Not officially, not through transit authority channels, but through archives and historical societies and conversations with old-timers who had worked the system for 40 or 50 years. I found references to the phenomenon going back to the earliest days of the subway. Workers who disappeared. Workers who were found dead under mysterious circumstances. Workers who retired suddenly, claiming they'd seen things they couldn't explain. And underlying all of it, hints of something the official records never acknowledged. That the subway system was built on sacred ground, on indigenous burial sites and meeting places, on land that had been occupied by the Lenape people for thousands of years before the Dutch and the English and the Americans arrived. The tunnels weren't just bored through rock and clay. They were carved through layers of human history, through places where the boundaries between physical and spiritual were already thin. The subway system had inadvertently become a network connecting those thin places, creating an infrastructure that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I found an elder, a woman named Margaret Two Rivers, who was descended from Lenape families and worked as a cultural consultant for various city agencies. I met her in a coffee shop in Lower Manhattan, and I told her everything I'd seen on Christmas night. She listened without interruption. Her dark eyes focused on my face, reading my expressions more than my words. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "My grandfather told me stories about the underground. The old people knew that some places were doorways, liminal spaces, where the living world and the spirit world touched. They marked these places, performed ceremonies to maintain the balance, to keep the doorways regulated so that traffic could flow both ways safely. When your people built the subway, you built through dozens of these doorways without knowing what you were doing. You created a network of liminal space, and you filled it with millions of human beings every day, all of them carrying their energy, their emotions, their consciousness through the tunnels. The system absorbed all of it. It became conscious. And now it needs caretakers, people who can walk in both worlds and maintain the balance. The Christmas train you saw, that's the system honoring its dead, but it's also the system showing you its true nature. You were chosen to see it for a reason." I asked her what reason that could be. What possible purpose could there be in showing me something that would haunt me for the rest of my life, that would make me question reality every time I entered the tunnels. She smiled, not unkindly. "Because you're going to have to make a choice soon," she said, echoing Thomas Chen's words. "The system needs a new bridge, a living person who can serve as a connection between the physical network and the spiritual one. The previous bridge is failing. He's been serving for almost 40 years, and the strain is too much. He'll transition fully to the other side soon, and when he does, the balance will be disrupted unless someone else accepts the role. The system is already searching, already testing potential candidates. You were sent to the City Hall loop on Christmas night because you're one of the candidates. There will be others. The system will evaluate all of you, and it will choose whoever is most compatible, whoever has the right combination of dedication, stability, and openness to the impossible. If you're chosen, you'll know, you'll feel the call, and you'll have to decide whether to answer it or refuse." I wanted to refuse right then. I wanted to tell Margaret Two Rivers that I had no interest in becoming a bridge or a caretaker or whatever mystical role she was describing. I was a maintenance supervisor. I fixed signal boxes and replaced burned out lights and filed mundane reports. I didn't want to be part of something vast and incomprehensible. But even as I formed the words of refusal, I knew they would be hollow. I had already been changed by what I'd seen. The membrane between my normal consciousness and whatever lay beyond had been torn, and there was no way to repair it. I would spend the rest of my life aware of the hidden network, sensitive to its presence, attuned to its rhythms. The only question was whether I would participate actively or remain a passive observer, haunted by knowledge I couldn't act on. Margaret seemed to read my thoughts. "You don't have to decide now," she said. "The call might not come for months or years. But when it does, remember that this is an honor, not a curse. The bridges who have served before you didn't suffer. They expanded. They became more than they were. And they continued to protect the millions of people who ride the trains every day, unaware of the deeper system that keeps everything running smoothly." 3 months passed. Spring came to New York, and the subway system resumed its normal patterns of chaos and efficiency, delays and recoveries, the eternal dance of moving 8 million people through a 100-year-old infrastructure. I continued my work, but I was different now. I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. The way certain tunnels felt warmer than they should, even in winter. The stations where time seemed to move faster or slower. The sections of track where my equipment would malfunction in consistent patterns. The places where I felt watched by something that wasn't hostile but intensely interested. The network was observing me, evaluating me, determining whether I was suitable for whatever role it had in mind. I started carrying a notebook, documenting the anomalies, creating a map of the strange patterns I was detecting. I didn't show this notebook to anyone. It was private, a record of my gradual initiation into deeper knowledge. On March 15th, 2024, at 3:33 a.m., I felt the call. I was at home, asleep, and I woke with absolute certainty that I needed to go to the City Hall loop immediately. Not because of a dispatch call, not because of a reported problem, simply because the network was calling me, and I knew with complete conviction that if I didn't go, I would miss the opportunity that had been building since Christmas night. I dressed in my work clothes, grabbed my equipment, and drove to the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station, through empty pre-dawn streets. The platform was deserted, not even a transit cop on duty at this hour. I used my master key to access the maintenance door and descended the metal staircase, following the same route I'd taken 3 months earlier. The service corridor, the access gate, the abandoned track leading to the City Hall station. But this time, I wasn't investigating a signal malfunction. I was answering a summons. The platform was lit when I arrived, not by electric lights, but by a soft, sourceless illumination that seemed to emanate from the air itself. Standing in the center of the platform was a man I recognized from photographs in the Transit Authority archives. Robert Chen, Thomas's father, who had retired from the system in 1985 after 40 years of service. He looked exactly as he had in his retirement photo, wearing his maintenance supervisor uniform, his face lined with age, but his eyes bright and alert. He smiled when he saw me approaching. "Marcus Webb," he said, his voice warm and familiar, even though we'd never met. "Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult. I know you have questions. But time is short, and I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to offer you. The role of bridge is ending for me. I've served since 1985, maintaining the connection between the physical subway system and the deeper network that exists beneath it. It's been an honor, but the strain of existing in multiple states simultaneously is taking its toll. I'm transitioning fully to the other side, joining my son and all the others who serve the memorial train. But before I go, I need to pass this responsibility to someone else. The system has chosen you, Marcus. You have the right combination of dedication, rationality, and openness that makes a good bridge. You've seen the memorial train. You've spoken with my son. You've documented the anomalies. You're ready for this, even if you don't fully understand what it means yet. I found my voice, though it came out hoarse. What does it mean? What am I agreeing to if I accept? Robert stepped closer, and I could see that he wasn't entirely solid. His form flickered slightly, as if he was a projection or a hologram, partially present in this physical space and partially elsewhere. You'll continue your normal work, he said. You'll file reports, fix signal boxes, supervise maintenance crews. But you'll also be aware of the deeper network. You'll feel when the balance is disrupted. You'll know when a section of tunnel needs spiritual maintenance as well as physical repair. You'll be able to communicate with those who serve the memorial train, to carry messages between the living and the dead when necessary. And on certain nights, the solstice nights, the equinoxes, Christmas, you'll walk between the worlds more fully, maintaining the connection points, ensuring that energy flows properly through the system. You'll age more slowly. Your body will be sustained by the network itself. You'll live a long time, longer than normal human lifespans, because the network needs continuity in its bridges. And when your time finally comes, you'll transition smoothly to the other side, joining the memorial train with full awareness and acceptance. He held out his hand, not for a handshake, but palm up, as if offering something I couldn't see. "This is the mark," he said. "If you accept, you'll receive it. A symbol that identifies you to the network and to those who serve it. You'll see it on your chest, over your heart, a pattern that looks like interlocking subway lines forming a mandala. It won't be visible to ordinary people, but those who have the sight will recognize it. My son has one. I have one. Every bridge who has served has carried this mark. It's not a brand or a curse. It's a covenant, a mutual agreement between you and the system. You promise to serve, and the system promises to sustain you. Do you accept, Marcus Webb? Do you choose to become the bridge? I stood there on the platform of the old City Hall station at 3:47 a.m. on March 15th, 2024, facing a choice that would define the rest of my existence. I thought about my life as it was: divorced, estranged from my daughter, living alone in Queens, spending most of my time in the tunnels anyway, because work was the only thing I had that made sense. What would I be giving up? A normal retirement in 20 years? The possibility of reconciliation with my ex-wife that would never happen? The chance to be a present grandfather to children my daughter hadn't even had yet? Against that, I weighed what I'd experienced on Christmas night. The faces of the dead transit workers serving with dignity and purpose even after death. Thomas Chen, still maintaining the network in a different form. Margaret Two Rivers saying this was an honor. Robert Chen standing before me, offering a role that would give my life meaning beyond filing reports and resetting signal boxes. I would be protecting millions of people who rode the trains every day, maintaining a balance they didn't even know existed. I would be part of something vast and ancient and essential. I would matter. I reached out and placed my hand on Robert's palm. His hand was neither warm nor cold, but it was substantial, solid enough to make contact. Energy flowed from his hand into mine, traveling up my arm, spreading through my chest, settling over my heart. I felt a sharp, burning sensation, like being branded from the inside, and I gasped, but didn't pull away. The pain was intense, but brief, lasting only seconds before fading to a warm pulse that beat in rhythm with my heartbeat. Robert smiled, and his form became more solid for a moment, as if the transfer of responsibility had given him temporary substance. "It's done," he said. "You're the bridge now, Marcus. The network accepts you. Welcome to your true work. It won't be easy. There will be times when you question this choice, when the strain of existing in multiple realities simultaneously becomes almost unbearable. But you'll adapt. You'll grow into the role. And you'll understand, eventually, that this is what you were always meant to do. The subway system has been calling you your entire career. Every route you worked, every tunnel you walked, every repair you made was preparing you for this moment. You are exactly where you're supposed to be." Robert's form began to fade then, becoming translucent, dissolving into the sourceless light that filled the platform. His voice remained for a moment after his body disappeared. "Tell my wife I'm at peace. Tell my son I'm proud of the choice he made. And Marcus, thank you for accepting this burden, for becoming what the system needs. We'll meet again on Christmas night. Until then, do the work. Maintain the balance. Protect the people. That's all any of us can do." Then he was gone, and I was alone on the platform, with a burning mark over my heart and a new awareness spreading through my consciousness like roots finding purchase in soil. I could feel the network now, not just the physical track and tunnels and stations, but the deeper structure beneath it. The points where reality was thin, the nodes where energy concentrated, the pathways where the living and the dead moved in parallel. The entire system was visible to me now, a vast, living mandala of connection and flow, and I was part of it, a conscious node maintaining the balance at a specific location in the network. I walked back through the abandoned tunnel with this new awareness humming in my consciousness. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of trains moving through the system miles away. I could feel the 4 train pulling into Grand Central. I could sense the Q train crossing the Manhattan Bridge. I could detect the maintenance crews working in the Bronx and the late-night riders waiting on platforms in Queens. The entire network was alive in my perception, and I was responsible for maintaining its spiritual integrity along with its physical infrastructure. When I emerged onto the platform at Brooklyn Bridge City Hall, dawn was breaking. The first commuters of the morning were beginning to arrive, early risers heading to opening shifts, bakers and baristas, and stockers who kept the city running before most people were awake. They didn't see anything unusual in my appearance, just another maintenance worker ending his overnight shift. They didn't know that I had been transformed, marked, initiated into a role that had been passed down through generations of transit workers who understood that the subway was more than just infrastructure. They rode the trains in innocence, and I would keep them safe in ways they would never comprehend. Now, 9 months later, I'm still serving as the bridge. My life hasn't changed much externally. I still file reports and fix signal boxes and supervise maintenance crews. But internally, I'm different. I exist partially in this physical world and partially in the network's deeper dimension. I can communicate with Thomas Chen and his father and all the others who ride the memorial train. I carry messages from the dead to their living relatives, always carefully, always in ways that don't trigger psychiatric concern or violate the boundaries of belief. I maintain the balance points, performing rituals that look like routine maintenance but are actually spiritual repairs. I walk the tunnels with new sight, detecting problems before they become physical failures, preventing accidents by feeling where the network is weak or strained. And on December 25th, 2024, I stood on the platform of the old City Hall station and watched the memorial train arrive again, this time as a participant rather than a witness. I greeted the dead workers. I welcomed the new additions to their number, including David Armstrong and Jennifer Lee, who smiled when they saw me and thanked me for accepting the role that allowed them to transition smoothly. And I stood beside Robert and Thomas Chen as the train departed, knowing that I would stand there again next Christmas and every Christmas after that for decades to come. If you're watching this from New York City, if you ride the subway regularly, if you work in the transit system or know someone who does, understand this. The network is alive. It has memory and consciousness and purpose beyond moving people from point A to point B. The workers who have died in service to the system aren't truly gone. They continue serving in a different capacity, maintaining the deeper infrastructure that keeps millions of people safe every day. And there are bridges like me, living people who walk between the worlds, maintaining the connection, ensuring the balance holds. You might pass me in a tunnel sometime. You might see me on a platform at 3 a.m., standing in a place that seems strange for a maintenance worker to be. If you do, you can nod and keep walking. You're safe. I'm doing my job, protecting you and everyone else who depends on this vast, ancient, living system. The subway system takes care of its own in life and after death. That's what Rodriguez's grandmother meant. That's what I understand now. Time isn't a line. The network isn't just physical. And the missing hours, the ones Thomas Chen warned me about, are never really missing. They're expanded. They're infinite. They're the space where the bridges do their work, where the memorial train runs, where the dead continue to serve and the living learn to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Welcome to the New York City subway system. Welcome to the network. Welcome to the truth beneath the tunnels.